What's going on, everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you on Sunday, December 8th, 2024, as number 1 Oregon defeats Penn State 45-37 to take the Big Ten Conference Championship game out there in Indianapolis. Dan Lanning and the Ducks are the Big Ten champs in their first year with the conference. And we also have some playoff ranking to get into as the bracket was revealed this morning, maybe even a little bit of recruiting, because why not? Dan Lanning and the Ducks are absolutely crushing it. And joining me as always is Justin Hopkins. J-Hop, how we doing?
Great, man. Doing it's always, as you know, it's always much nicer and easier to do our job when the Ducks win, which doesn't always happen, but it did happen yesterday. They really tested our patience, but the message board is much better, and overall it just makes things a lot easier when the Ducks win.
Everybody likes talking about a win, that's for sure. Oregon didn't make it easy, though. They didn't make it easy on Penn State, but they also didn't necessarily make it the easiest on the hearts of the fans that were watching that one, whether they were at Lucas Oil Stadium or at home or tailgating, wherever they were. This was a thriller in every way. We have a lot that we can get into, but I think the prevailing thought that I have that we can maybe just get into as we start to break this one down, Justin, for much of the season, I think that the defense has been Oregon's strong suit and at times been the difference and helped them win games or stay in games. Not to say the offense has been poor, but that's just been, I think, how the balance has kind of been shifted. On Saturday, Oregon's offense did most of the heavy lifting and really won them the game as the defense was all out of sorts in a lot of ways, but they did come up with some pretty big plays that obviously helped them win this game. But that was not necessarily what I was expecting, but we knew it was going to be a tough physical game against Penn State.
Yeah, you got to tip your cap to Penn State. They unloaded the war chest. I mean, they had some pretty wild plays out there. It felt like, at times it felt a little gimmicky, but that feels like I'm discrediting them, and I don't feel right saying that word, but it did kind of feel that way. And they dialed it up. Obviously neither of these teams had a really good defensive game. I'll just kind of say it, really disappointed with Oregon's defense, and just it felt like a lack of effort at times, which is probably unfair, but just looking at it and seeing this defense really just giving up so many big plays. And obviously the interceptions were great, and they did do a pretty good job buckling down in the red zone at times and forcing field goals. But at the end of the day, they gave up way too many points. And, that's something that, clearly is going to have to be better because of, the path to winning a national championship is going to go through some really good football teams. Regardless of who it is, they're all really good football teams. So got to buckle that down. But my final thought there is, when you're 13-0 and you're Oregon and you've gone through the season undefeated, and you get to 8-0, 9-0, 10-0, you're getting everybody's best shot. You're getting everyone's best shot, and they're studying you hard, and they're, like Penn State did, they're unloading the war chest at you, probably doing things that they wouldn't normally do, trying to, carve out a win or figure out a way to pull off an upset. And, that's what makes a great team is the resiliency and finding different ways to win. You're not going to get to 13-0 winning the exact same way every week. Sometimes it's the offense. Sometimes it's the defense. Sometimes you need a lucky bounce. Sometimes it's the run game carrying the team. You just don't know. And it's up to the coaches to figure out, what is working in that particular game and ride it out. And I think, I think the staff did that pretty well.
The defense and what they were able to do, I guess, or maybe not do, against the Penn State rushing attack was by far and away the biggest surprise for me, Justin, because we always know that I think a key part of Penn State's identity is not just running the ball, but having really, really good running backs. Katron Allen and Nick Singleton were just a force out there on Saturday, and the Nittany Lions ran for almost 300 yards on Oregon, 292 yards, 2 touchdowns. at 8.3 a carry. And the way that Drew Aller was operating, he played a hell of a game, even though he had those 2 interceptions. The way he was operating, even though he only ran the ball 5 times, it felt like he ran it like 15, and he was just getting exactly what he needed every time he took off. But the defense buckled up when they needed to. There were times when I just didn't really recognize that unit after the dominant season that they've had, but they I don't know. I'm still a little bit at a loss for words. I'm still kind of trying to process all of it. But the other thought that I wanted to throw out there after listening to you about just finding different ways to win, I found myself thinking last night, is this how Washington felt to a degree last year with the special season that they had and winning some really close games? And it definitely came to a point on Saturday against Penn State when I was kind of thinking, well, you might win ugly, but just win at this point. And that's what they did. The Ducks got it done.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, seasons of the past for Bama, they've, those dominant seasons they've had, same thing. They've had to find different ways to win. Sometimes they throw the ball more than Nick Saban probably would have liked to, but that's what it took to win that game. Georgia, same thing in the past seasons. You get to 12-0 and the margins are slim, right? I mean, statistically speaking, your chances of remaining undefeated continue to go down and go down. So it gets really hard. And again, I have to tip my cap to Penn State. I thought, their offensive coordinator, really did a good job of keeping, Oregon's defense off balance. Like Oregon's defense was just, completely lost. And I mean, I'm talking about the players. I'm talking about the coordinators, just really did not have that game dialed in whatsoever. And, middle of the field was a wide open, vacant, piece of real estate for Penn State consistently, whether it was Tyler Warren or them running the football directly up the middle. There was no edge pressure from Mateo or Jordan Birch. I thought watching Jordan Birch, I'm convinced myself that he's not back to 100%. It certainly didn't look like we saw 100% version of Jordan Birch. Maybe these next 2 weeks help get him closer to that. Jabbar Muhammad played pretty well. The safeties, the safeties, Tysheem Johnson, Kobe Savage, had pretty good games. Those guys were asked to do a lot, I think. But again, they were obviously out of position on several plays, letting, players run behind them for wide open touchdowns. So it was all out of sorts. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was the travel. I don't know, unfamiliar opponent, but again, they found a way to win. I know we're feeling nitpicky and we are being nitpicky, but at the end of the day, both you and I are we're super impressed, super proud of this team for winning. Big Ten champions, that's not lost on me. 13-0, that's not lost on me. Fantastic season, and you get the win. Again, it was one of those things, you win by 1, you win by 100, it doesn't matter, right? Just win the damn game. Oregon won the game, whether it was 7 points or 27 points. They won, and they're Big Ten champs, and it's been a hell of a season.
Just on the topic of nitpicking, I'm sure that there's some fans out there when we're nitpicking a little bit that are going to agree with what we're saying and say that, hey, you got to be able to be critical of the team just as much as you're able to sing their praises. So we tried to strike that balance as best we can. To speak to some of the positive stuff, Justin, Dylan Gabriel had another really, really good game. And I don't know, that there was a time earlier in the year, obviously those first 2 weeks, where I was like, I don't know, is he going to be the guy that is going to be able to really win these big games for Oregon? And the litmus test was Ohio State. And ever since then, I haven't necessarily doubted him. I've had some hesitations when he had some red zone interceptions that obviously didn't help them. But he's just proven to be an absolute gamer, and he's shown why he's one of the very best quarterbacks in all of college football. 4 touchdowns, which was tied for a Big Ten championship record from a quarterback, 283 yards, 22 of 32, and was only sacked 1 time all night. I think what might have impressed me the most from Gabriel's performance and orchestrating that Oregon offense was what he was able to do with his legs, whether it was taking off and keeping it in some pretty key situations. I think he could have run more. I think that's another element of this offense that still can be tapped into, but really buying time and extending plays and feeling the pressure, navigating the pocket, that was just really, really impressive. And you just got to feel confident going into the college football playoff, having number 8 as your quarterback. And I think the other thing that stood out to me from the offensive standpoint was the game that Noah Whittington had. There were definitely some times, especially I think it was the second to last drive when they were trying to close it out, where I was just absolutely shocked that Jordan James wasn't in the game, and they were opting instead to go with Noah Whittington on a drive that could have closed out the game, and they went 3-and-out. But aside from that drive, Noah Whittington was really, really good and almost practically on par with Jordan James. Jordan James finished with 20 carries for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Whittington 15 carries for 82 yards. Had a higher yards per carry at 5.5 compared to James's 4.4. So his consistency and big playability, he had some huge runs where he just demonstrated his tremendous balance. Is going to be a huge asset to Oregon down the line, because we know that Jordan James is more than likely, I would say, the heart and soul of the offense, with Oregon really liking to run the ball to establish themselves. But for Whittington to be able to step up and kind of close the gap in that drop off from James, I think is just absolutely huge, and it's happening at an awesome time.
Well, it's depth. It's a difference in depth, right? And I think it was on display because when you're playing a track meet like the game was last night, I don't know. I noticed personally, and I think I called it out with the friends I was watching the game here with. You could see the last couple drives, Tyler Warren had nothing left in the tank. The dude was gassed, and I don't blame him at all. It's not his fault. He had a hell of a game. But you could see those last two, he was literally trying to do a cut, and it just was one of those where you just got to – he had nothing left in the tank. And it was easy to see him. I think you look at Penn State's running backs, and they were feeling the load come the end of the game. So I think when you have Jordan James, who did so much damage in the first half for Oregon, and obviously through periods of the third quarter, and I do, on paper, Jordan James is probably the better running back of the two between him and Whittington. But you bring in a relatively fresh Whittington in the fourth quarter, that's a different thing. Jordan James has toted the load and done a good job and tired and probably nicked up by the end of the game. And then you bring in Noah Whittington, and he's like, "Oh, I'm fresh, I'm good." Makes a difference. That defense is like, man, why is that guy so fresh and so fast? And it's just because Oregon's depth, and I think that was a big thing. Again, to your point with Dillon Gabriel, he's one of the most complete quarterbacks in the country. I thought Drew Aller, showed why he's an NFL guy. I mean, some of those throws he was making were unreal. He was dropping dimes in there. But, to have a Dillon Gabriel that, is basically a 10-second Tom. And, what's a 10-second Tom? Well, you forget about the last play in 10 seconds. That's actually a good quality in a quarterback. If you make a mistake, you fumble the ball, you throw a pick, you throw a bad ball, shake it off and move on. And Dillon Gabriel does that with the best of them. So, and again, I guess overall, coming away from the game, entering the game, Oregon was relatively at full strength as far as we know, injury-wise. No, major injuries, it looks like, throughout the game. I know Jamari Caldwell got dinged up and went down for a bit, but looks like he was okay there. So, and then now you got 2 weeks to rest those guys up. So, all good things for Oregon, but we know the real work's just getting started, it feels like.
It is just getting started. And now that the Ducks have a first-round bye with the top seed, they'll have a bunch of time, just about 3 weeks, I think, until New Year's Day to rest up when they face the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. So that's a great development for them, just to have that time with how brutal of a schedule that they've had this year and those 8 straight games, of course. One of the notes that I thought was interesting on the health front was Marcus Harper was available. He did play, but really not nearly as much as I expected him to. The Ducks opted to go with Dave Iuli at right guard, and they kind of used Harper sparingly. And I think that could be to their benefit later on, just having a fresher Harper with him, I would assume, getting the nod in the Rose Bowl. But that's why I'm not on the coaching staff. And I think Iuli played pretty well. Obviously, the staff wouldn't have kept him out there if they didn't think that he was able to hold his own. So his progression and development has been a really positive development for Alik Terry with that group, obviously a finalist for the Joe Moore Award. Let's talk about some of the weapons that Oregon has and what they did, Justin, because Tez Johnson had a tremendous game, 11 catches for 181 yards and a touchdown. And then you add on, this was the first time his biological family got to see him play. And it's just an awesome story. Terrence Ferguson had a touchdown. Kenyon Sadiq had 2 touchdowns, so they really shined. But aside from that, the receivers didn't really do a whole lot. I know a lot of people on our boards were wondering where Evan Stewart was. I know that they made him a big part of their game plan defensively. Penn State did. But you love what you see from those tight ends at Oregon. And I think one of the questions that I have is, why did Kenyon Sadiq not get more touches after those 2 touchdowns? That was just baffling to me, because he's obviously a super special playmaker. And there were times when Oregon's offense was stalling pretty hard. And I'm like, well, at least you got to try to get the ball to some of these playmakers. And there were times where I just felt like they were kind of ramming their heads into the wall with a lot of the screen calls. I know a lot of our subscribers were upset with that on the boards. And I can understand, using the screen every now and then, but God, it's like, if it's not working, maybe you should stop calling it.
Yeah, no, I will say, I mean, Will Stein's among one of the best, but I would say one of his small criticisms is that he tends to get almost too cute with it, and it's like, and back to the, and I will say this about that in the same way. The reason I would imagine that Dave Iuli was out there instead of Marcus Harper, or for more so, because I'm a big proponent of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? I mean, you really didn't have a big drop off from Harper to Iuli.
Yeah.
And so yeah, if your offensive line was cooking last week, I would see why you would stick with that. Let Harper now he's going to have 3 weeks, 2 weeks, and then this week to get even healthier. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's the way what I would want to say to Will Stein is sometimes, it gets too cute. And it's like, man, if the run game's working, it ain't broke, don't fix it. Keep running the football. Keep Jordan James out there. And I felt the same way about Kenyon Sadiq. It's like, okay, this guy's off to a torrid start, and then literally just, went nowhere after that. So, yeah, I think that, it's hard, and it's easy for us to nitpick after, because when you're in the game, you're looking at a big call sheet and trying to figure out, what the defense is doing. Obviously, we're nitpicking because you put 45 points up on the board, so you obviously did some things right. But yeah, I think there's areas that Oregon can fine tune. And let's be fair, even us nitpicking, I guarantee Dan Lanning isn't in the meetings today with the team saying, hey, we played a perfect game, there's nothing to work on, right? Sure. That's not what's going on. He's going to go in there, hey, like, we won. I'm happy we won. Great. You guys, good effort. Here's what we need to get better at. And that's what builds a championship team. You go in there and you say, hey, look, let's have the honest talk in the room. Defense, you didn't play a very good game. We weren't getting pressure on the quarterback. We got to up that in the next couple games here. And so you have those tough talks, and we're here to talk about it too. So I know fans we're gonna get some comments in here like, oh, you guys are just bashing the Ducks. No, not at all. We are totally happy. Great team, great win. Dylan Gabriel, the Tez Johnson bit was probably my favorite thing of the whole game. Seeing him explode, like you said, it sure felt like the game plan was that Penn State wanted to bracket Evan Stewart for some reason. That's apparently what they felt like was their best play. Well, I mean,
pick your poison.
Yeah, I mean, okay, Tez Johnson's going to eat then, and he did, and that was an awesome performance for him, and a way to really just kind of solidify his ability at this level. And Ohio State or Tennessee, whoever Oregon ends up playing next, you're gonna have to pick your poison. Are you gonna see this big game from Tez and decide, hey, we're gonna focus on Tez and bracket him? Maybe we see that big game from Evan Stewart, and hopefully that's, if you're Will Stein and the offensive coaches, that's what you see. You're looking at that and saying, okay, if this is what the defense is doing, we're gonna go take, what they're giving. So whether it's T. Ferg or Sadiq or Evan Stewart, the run game, maybe it's Trayshawn Holden. Trayshawn's had some big games too. So that's what makes this Oregon team so great, is the balance. And I think we're seeing people talk about that more from a national perspective, is that, hey, look, this Oregon team might not be completely littered with 5 stars. It might not be all first rounders, but they're balanced. They're balanced on offense. They're balanced on defense. They've got depth. And obviously you can see the culture and buy-in is really strong. So, all those things are great, but you still got to win some more games, and they're going to be tough.
The other thing that comes to mind for me with the defense, for as bad of a day as it was collectively, you got to tip your cap to them coming up with those 2 interceptions, because there really wasn't a huge difference or gap in a lot of these statistical categories between Oregon and Penn State, but the Ducks won the turnover battle, and you knew this was going to be a key area for them. obviously Nico Reed's pick at the end was huge. Dante Manning almost had that pick six, and for the career that he's had at Oregon, I mean, I'm super fired up that he got that pick, but he was probably the last guy that I expected to come away with just a huge interception in such a crucial moment. So that's just tremendous to see for him, for all the challenges and obstacles that he's faced at Oregon. I know he's had a lot of injuries as well. So really good to see for him. And then for Nico Reed to get that pick, tremendous play, but also why would you feel the need to go for broke there if you're Penn State? I just really didn't understand that. But that he stepped up when he needed to, and that just shows you how big time this secondary is in terms of just their playmakers stepping up when it matters most.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the balance once again, right? Because even though the defensive line didn't play well last night, generally speaking for the season, that's a pretty good defensive line. And then you're going to, hey, we're not going to run the ball on these guys. Let's challenge the secondary. Well, it's pretty tough to challenge Jabbar Muhammad with a lot of success, although he gave up a couple last night, not a bunch. And then, like you said, there's moments where Nico Reed and Dante Manning just step up and make plays. And, the safeties typically do a pretty good job. Again, I think that's what, Penn State clearly saw, that they were going to, Oregon was going to creep up to the line, and they took advantage of their shots deep. And again, I tip my cap to Drew Aller. I mean, the balls he was throwing were dimes. I mean, he had the one where I think it was Mateo was draped on him, and he still, threw a perfect ball to his receiver in the end zone. And
that was just crazy.
Yeah, sometimes there's just not much more you can do, when somebody's playing like that. So yeah, love that those guys, stepped up and made plays when they needed to. And I'm with you. I mean, I when James Franklin went for two, I was kind of scratching my head like, okay, what are we doing? Like, there was a couple of things that just like, all right, that doesn't make the most sense. But again, it's when you're Penn State and you're playing 13-0 Oregon and you're the underdog, you're basically saying, hey, we're just throwing the kitchen sink. And if we win and pull off an upset, great. And if we don't, we gave it our best shot. And that's exactly what they did. They brought their best shot to Oregon.
And how about the big picture outlook here, Justin, just for Oregon as a program? I think it was the first time since 2015. I don't know if I have the stat quite right, but they're the first team in a while to beat Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State in the same year.
Ever.
And ever. Yeah, that's crazy. And for Oregon to go from losing to Washington when they did, obviously that was a big problem for them to step. I mean, we know that this Washington team this year wasn't the same one as last year. Like I can admit that, but to win these big time games, two of them either on the road or neutral site, right? With Penn State and Michigan, I think that's just a tremendous, tip of the cap to what Dan Lanning is building at Oregon and having his guys locked in and stepping up, showing up in those big moments. He's proven time and time again, I think, at least this season, right, to be an in-game asset as a head coach, which a lot of Oregon fans know that hasn't always been the case with his predecessors.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was the knock on Lanning basically here in his third year, was he doesn't win the big games. And by winning the big games, obviously lost 2 to Washington last year. Georgia beat the hell out of him to start his head coaching debut. And yeah, I mean, kind of looking for that, that hallmark win, winning those big games. He got all that this year. You beat Ohio State. That's a statement win for him. That's, that's something he can hang his hat on. This Penn State game, I mean, that's a statement win. That's another one he can hang his hat on, obviously being a Big Ten conference champion. So, all those questions are now kind of answered. And it's just, sky's the limit, as long as Oregon can keep them there and keep the resources going, to NIL. And when I say that, I say NIL, I mean, you look at the 3 facets of NIL, right? It's recruiting at the prep level. You've got to have some assets there to recruit the way Oregon does. Recruiting through the transfer portal, obviously you've got to have some assets there to, attract a Dylan Gabriel and a Derek Harmon and a Jabbar Muhammad, all guys that are playmakers for you this year. And then the last one is retention of your current roster. I mean, Oregon is one of the very best that keeps its talent when it gets to Eugene. I mean, yeah, they get a few transfers here and there, but we don't really set off the alarms with, this 5-star is leaving Oregon that signed last year. That doesn't really happen. Additionally, and I'll say this because I know you and I are going to talk transfer portal and stuff like that in the coming weeks, which it opens up tomorrow on Monday. You got to think about this team. Oregon got Terrence Ferguson to come back this year. That took resources. That didn't happen for free. Jeff Bassa came back for this season and has been a big key to the success. Again, that took resources to get Jeff Bassa not to go into the NFL draft. Jordan Birch, same story, right? You get my point. There's the three facets there, and Oregon has a really good handle on all three. So, yeah, I mean, got to love that Dan Lanning knows how to handle a program, build a roster, manage games, all those things. And I think the one thing he likes people to compliment him on is being a master motivator, and he is. We could see the videos, when they come out after the game and the little things he does to get the team ready for that game. And it's like, man, you can have all the talent in the world, and I think you could use Alabama this year as an example. That's not a team that's lacking talent, but if you don't get them motivated, what good does it do you? And obviously Dan Lanning's really good at that. Alabama, I know we're going to talk about it here in a minute, but getting left out of the playoffs and 3 losses, that's pretty unsettling for those Alabama fans.
It certainly is. And we're going to get to some playoff talk in just a second here. But before we get to that, let's give a big shout out and thank you to one of our sponsors here, Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your plans are for dinner tonight, but head on over to Ranchito at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Try the homemade tortillas. They got great food, a great environment, and they will take care of you. Say what's up to my guy, Ruben, and let him know that Max Torres sent you. So, Justin, on Sunday morning, we saw the playoff bracket get locked in and set. You alluded to part of it. One of the biggest developments, maybe not a shock or maybe a shock, was that the Alabama Crimson Tide were left off the bracket with those 3 losses that they took this year. And instead, the committee decided to slot in SMU in their place. And SMU will play Penn State in their first round game. So not a ton of, craziness that we weren't necessarily expecting. Obviously, Oregon getting the top spot, that made sense. How about Boise State and ASU at 3 and 4 respectively? Oregon's win over Boise State kind of aged like fine wine throughout the year. And then for Arizona State, former Oregon offensive coordinator, now head coach Kenny Dillingham, taking a 3-9 team last year with some of those NCAA violations and just all they had to overcome with Herm Edwards' departure, and taking them to the top of the Big 12. Just a tremendous story. And it's going to be a lot of fun games for us to watch here over the next month or so.
Yeah, my favorite part is definitely, the Arizona State Cinderella season. Regardless of whatever happens to Arizona State moving forward, that does not take away from what Coach Dillingham did down there. Absolutely special. And of course, with a Oregon native leading his offense at quarterback and Sam Leavitt. So, love seeing that. In terms of Oregon, look, we can sit here. It's already been said. The seeding has failed, right? The way they've set up the college football playoff has failed. And I will say this, the committee chair was talking after, and Reese Davis asked him outright, like, hey, what doesn't it feel like Oregon's being penalized? He asked the tough questions. And the sad part is the response was right. Like the committee chair said, look, our job is not to sit here and create matchups that favor anyone. Our jobs is to rank the teams 1 through 25. That's all we look at. However it falls is how it falls. We are not going to sit here and adjust rankings so that somebody gets a favorable matchup. So it's the right answer. It's flawed from the ground up. It's not the committee's fault this time that Oregon drew Ohio State or Tennessee, whoever happens to win this game. So will they fix it? Lord knows. Who knows if they will? I guess my opinion is this. If it happened against an SEC team, it probably gets fixed sooner than later. But it happened to Oregon, so we'll have to wait till next year to see if maybe it hoses Alabama or Georgia or Tennessee or whoever. But Dan Lanning was on after. I don't know how long you tuned in, but they had Dan Lanning come on and do a quick interview. And I thought Nick Saban, asked one of the best questions you could ask is like, hey, you've got, 10 days or whatever here before you know who your opponent is. It's more like 12 days before you know who your next opponent is. How do you kind of, go through that phase of knowing you've got a football game, but not knowing who your opponent is? And Lanning answered it really well. First off, Lanning said, hey, whoever we play is who we play. We don't care. Like, it's just, there was no excuse to be made. But, his answer was, we'll prepare as best we can for both. And of course, obviously, once you figure out who it is on the 21st, you'll go back and relook at your tape from those two games, but that's how we've got to prepare moving forward. So I think for Duck fans wanting to know what Oregon will do the next couple of weeks, that's apparently how they'll plan. I will say this, and my final thought on that part real quick is that it seemed almost assured, no matter what happened yesterday or whatever, as long as Oregon was the number 1 seed, you were potentially playing either Ohio State or Penn State in some form of a rematch. That number 18 was either going to be Ohio State or Penn State. It happened to be Ohio State. And I will say, at least for the sake of the playoff, you've already played Ohio State this year. So now you can go back and at least look at film from that game with them directly. And if they make it, you probably have a little bit better feel than, hey, we haven't played Texas yet. We haven't played Clemson yet. We haven't played SMU yet. You had a bunch of other teams that you haven't played yet that you kind of have to start from ground zero. So I think that's, again, yeah, do we want to see Oregon play Ohio State again? Okay, fine, whatever. Yeah, sure, we do. Beat them a second time, it's even better. But at least from a coaching standpoint, you've already got a little bit of a leg up saying, hey, we played these guys. Let's go play that film, watch a couple other games around it, watch them play Penn State, and then we'll get to work on Tennessee as well.
And having that familiarity with a previous opponent, I think is good in a lot of ways. You just have a better understanding and knowing of them going into the game. But there's also the other side of the coin, and what I think is, I don't know if I'd say it's a cliche or just a common saying, but I think there's some truth to it. It's hard to beat the same team twice in 1 year. And that's not to say that I don't think Oregon could do it or wouldn't be favored. That's just, I think, the reality of it, because we know that Ohio State's a team that has a lot of talent. Obviously, the wheels kind of came off for them on the back end of the season, losing to Michigan in the way that they did, and all the fallout that came from that, the flag planting in the shoe. That those fans are going to show up when they play Tennessee, because that one's out there in Columbus. But I don't know. I think it'd be cool to see them play Tennessee too. In that regard, I feel like that might be a little bit more of a favorable matchup for them, just between those two teams. They have a young quarterback in Nico Iamaleava, so I think if you can get a guy that's a little bit more inexperienced, that's obviously to your benefit as well. But Tennessee is no slouch by any means. I know that defense is legit. They got a great running back as well, and a former Duck and Dante Thornton out there. So it'll be fun. I'm excited to watch the playoff. I'm glad that you and I can kind of catch our breath a little bit here now that we're through National Signing Day, and we know what Oregon's going to be doing, and they have a nice break before they return to action on New Year's Day. So we'll see what a team like Indiana can do. They've had not necessarily a Cinderella season like Arizona State, but they've been a really fun team to follow this year under Curt Cignetti. And the more football is always the best, but I definitely see where Duck fans are coming from when they talk about Oregon not getting a favorable path by any means.
Well, no, look at if you're watching on YouTube with us, look at as I face it, the left side of the bracket. You got Oregon, Tennessee, Ohio State, Texas, and even Clemson's playing pretty good football here. Like, I look at the right side of the bracket and it's like, okay, yeah, Notre Dame, they're good, but not really the fear factor. Indiana, I think Oregon would be, a 10-point favorite over Indiana. Not really the scare factor that Texas has as a 5. Georgia is potentially playing their third string quarterback or their second. Who knows? They're, they had some quarterback issues to finish out that game. And I'm not sure that you'll see Carson Beck back out there. That was a pretty tough hit on his arm. And, and then Boise State, Oregon's beaten Boise State. Oregon's beaten Penn State. Oregon would be at least a 10-point favorite over SMU if they were playing. So, yeah, you just look at the left side of the bracket, and it's tough. Oregon's got some really good teams in there. I think for me, there was 2 teams this year that could beat anybody in the country if they were playing well, and outside of the top 2 or 3. And it was Tennessee and it was Ole Miss. Like when Ole Miss was on, they're a really good football team. They'd had games where they weren't on. They lost. That's the end of that. But that's a team where if Lane Kiffin's got Jackson Dart lined up and everything, that's a really, really tough football team to play against. Tennessee's the other one. If good Nico shows up and Tennessee's in its bag, they're a really good football team. I think Tennessee's going to beat Ohio State. That's my early prediction at the moment. I know it's at the Horseshoe. I don't know that Ohio State's playing its best football. I bet you there's a little bit of concern within that locker room after the loss to Michigan. So I think that Ohio State-Tennessee game is a very bad matchup for Ohio State. So we'll see. I'm excited for all of it. I'm excited for all of it. I don't feel the least bit bad for Bama. You lose 3 games, you shouldn't be in the playoff. Like, it's that simple. Go win your flipping football games. Don't cry about it. You already play one less conference game than everybody else already. Shut up. Win your games. That's what I got to say. I mean, I don't love everything the committee did, but I do think they got that right.
You got to win. Just show up and take care of your business, and that's not what Bama did this year. How about we switch gears a little bit, Justin, and talk about recruiting to wrap up today's show? What do you say?
Yep. Yeah, all lost in the shuffle was Dan Lanning getting another commit.
So let's talk about that commit as Oregon went back into Southern California on Saturday to land a commitment from 2026 Ventura On-3 industry 4-star linebacker Tristan Phillips, who committed to Oregon over the likes of Oklahoma, Washington, Utah, Wisconsin, and a host of other programs. The Ducks are back in SoCal, and they get a really, really nice piece to add to an already top-ranked 2026 class. This is a class that I think clearly has the potential, Justin, to be a historic haul for Lanning and the Ducks, who just signed the number 3 recruiting class in 2025 earlier this week. And then there's still a couple pieces at play. I think you miss out on Andrew Olesh, and it's looking pretty unlikely that you'll get that number 1 spot. But there's no doubt that there's still some significant recruiting momentum for Oregon. And I think this could definitely be a piece that gets lost in the shuffle given everything that Oregon's accomplished over the last week and on the field. But the 2025s are going to be on campus before you know it. I'm working on tracking down when those guys are going to be enrolling. A lot of them are coming in early. But the 2026 class is really going to take over as the premier focus, aside from the transfer portal, of course. But Phillips is a tremendous player. I've gotten to cover him quite a bit. And he's a great interview. Have all that over on ScoopDuck. But what a great win on the recruiting trail for Lanning and Brian Michalowski.
Yeah, I mean, if this is what we're gonna call the floor of Oregon's commits for 2026, it's pretty dang good. Like, this kid had some legit offers. You look at his film; he's a terrific looking player. Right on he's technically a 4-star linebacker, but he's right on the cusp of 4-3-star. That's just where he's at right now. I think this is a guy that could move up the rankings. And, again, if this is one of Oregon's lower rated commits, for this class, which is basically a 4-star guy, probably going to be okay. Probably going to be fine. Position of need, obviously, as we know, Oregon with we'll call it 2 linebacker signees in the 2025 class. And that's if we put Nasir Wyatt in there with Gavin Nix. I think, if you're Dan Lanning, you're looking to probably get a minimum of 2, probably 3 guys in this next 2026 cycle. So this is a good way to start. I'm looking at my phone because I wanted to say this. Right now, Oregon's got the number 3 class in 2025, which you mentioned just a minute ago. The basically the score or the average commit rating, the number 1 class, Texas, is 94.26. The number 2 class, which is Alabama, is 93.696. Oregon's at number 3 is 93.659. So they're basically like 4 100ths of a point behind the number 2 class. Reason I mention that is because that's where Oregon, the margin from being 1 to 3 to 1 to 4, whatever, is infinitesimal. I mean, basically, if you're Dan Lanning, you're looking to sign top 5 classes back to back to back if you can. That's what Alabama's done. That's what Georgia's done. That's how they build those blue blood programs like that. And, obviously last year, Oregon finished in the top 5. This year in 2025, they finished in the top 5. Could move up from number 3. I don't know. It's pretty unlikely they'll finish number 1, and that's okay. Number 3, number 2, number 4, all of those are good spots. And then, as we know, with Tristan Phillips in the fold in 2026, Oregon's already got the number 1 ranked class in 2026. So in terms of stacking talent, it's all right there. And again, I'll just say it again because it needs to be repeated. Oregon is not just going out and taking guys because they're highly ranked, even if they don't need that position. That's not what they're doing. They're going out and filling roster positions with elite talent and making sure that this roster is deep and balanced. And so that's what it takes to win national championship football. So gotta love that Oregon's set up for the long haul. Gotta love that Oregon's 13-0. Gotta love that Oregon just signed the number 3 ranked class. Gotta love that they added once again to the number 1 ranked 2026 class. And I know you said this a minute ago, and I almost called you on it. You're like, oh man, I just can't wait to catch my breath. Transfer portal opens tomorrow. And I'm just saying, Dan Lanning does not mess around in the transfer portal. That guy brings in dudes. So, the transfer portal is going to maybe take a few players from Oregon, but it's definitely going to giveth in abundance. So I'm excited to see, the areas that Dan Lanning kind of identifies where they might need help on this roster, in which guys, because if our listeners haven't paid attention so far, the transfer portal is already popping. Like, it's insane. Like, some of these guys jumping in, you're like, I'm actually starting to wonder if LSU is going to be able to field the team next year with how many guys have leaving LSU. So USC just lost one of their better defensive linemen. Not that they had any extras to get rid of. So, I mean, like, it's transfer portal season. So we'll focus on that for the next week or two, and then it's right back into football.
It is. Yeah, I think for me, like, just to give some final thoughts on the recruiting and transfer portal stuff, it's at a point where we know that they're recruiting incredibly high level players, but Lanning hasn't been around necessarily long enough for us to see the results of stacking that to the highest degree. I mean, they just won the Big Ten and they went 13-0. So, like, that's amazing, but I still don't know that the roster is necessarily at that point where it's like, oh, hey, we just got another 5-star that you can, another good player, of course, and you can't have all 5 stars. But what I'm saying is that this is another elite class. And I think we're going to see more and more each year as Lanning does this, more players see the field sooner than later. And you're like, oh, wait, that's a true freshman. Yeah, like they just got 2 5-star receivers, 2 5-star corners. I know Brandon Finney isn't a 5-star on 3, but like Dorian Brew is a former 5-star. So just the talent is
they're elite dudes.
Yeah. Absolutely elite dudes. And then to see them supplement that with some guys in the transfer portal that we're going to be like, wait, that guy is going to Oregon? Like, that someone is going to come to Oregon at some point, and fans are going to be like, what on earth just happened? There's going to be a Derek Harmon-esque addition or a Jabbar Muhammad-esque addition, just because that's what the history tells us. And Oregon's not messing around. They want to win. They want to win now, and they want to win over the course of however many years. So they're going to take advantage of it every bit that they're able to. And we're just going to have you guys covered all over the place over on ScoopDuck.
Important reminder, though, okay, as we're talking as it relates to transfer portal, okay, not every guy, okay, that leaves Georgia is a guy Oregon should take. All right, let's just throw that out there because, I mean, a lot of times people are like, oh, this guy played at Georgia, this guy played at Bama. Great programs. Even they miss, okay, or whatever the case might be. And the second thing, again, just remember, not every one of those guys should be a take for Oregon. Secondly, and importantly, it's going to be lost, but character matters, right? You go look at the makeup of this team right now, and outside of the Dalen Austin situation, hasn't been a lot of noise, okay? This isn't like Georgia where we're racking up speeding and reckless driving tickets on the regular. Like, Oregon's got a roster full of really good human beings. And it takes that to get to 13-0. It takes that to get where Oregon's at now. So again, I think, it reminds me of the Bear Alexander recruitment from last year. Obviously went to USC as a defensive lineman. A lot of people were linking Oregon there, and Oregon just didn't feel like it was a great fit for them at that time, at that moment, with where he was at. There's rumors of him jumping back in the portal again, and everybody's immediately talking about Oregon. We'll see. I mean, Oregon's going to have their pick. So just remember, just because a guy was a 5-star coming out of high school and went to Georgia doesn't make it a guy that Oregon should take. I mean, there's a lot of Derek Harmon, I think he was a 3-star out of high school, right? I believe. Doesn't matter. You have to look it up. But he was not a 5-star. He was not a top 100 guy. I mean, and there's not many defensive linemen you would rather trade Derek Harmon for out there, to have on your roster right now. So just remember, there's some really Johnny Cornelius. Who in the hell was a Johnny Cornelius before he showed up, right?
Rhode Island.
Turns out he's a pretty good offensive tackle. So just remember, these guys, they do their evaluations, they trust their evaluations, and they know what they need to get onto this team to make an impact. So, but I'm excited. I love transfer portal season. I just think it's fun. I don't ever like to see the guys leave Oregon, but you understand their decisions and probably why they're doing it. I just love to see basically Dan Lanning go out there and, oh, that guy's really good. Ohio State wants him. Nah, we'll take him.
It's crazy. You can't rule anything out in the transfer portal era. But Justin, we've had a lot of good stuff here. I think that we're going to go ahead and wrap it there, though, for today's episode. We'll have you guys covered over on ScoopDuck, of course, with everything that's going on with the playoff, with recruiting, with transfer portal. We're your one-stop shop. So come check us out at ScoopDuck.com. If you want to find more of Justin, follow him on Twitter/X at JHopkinsSD. You can find me anywhere at Torres Sports. Subscribe to the ScoopDuck On 3 YouTube channel. We've been taking off, and we love the support. And share the show. Share the pod with any and everyone that you know. And we'll see you guys in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.